Week 11, let's get to it. All the games in the books except for maybe the headliner of the season with Philadelphia and Kansas City tonight. Looking at the schedule this week, we may recap that one and give you an episode tomorrow and then something else planned for later in the week. But we start with San Francisco as a Super Bowl contender. That's not news. They're the 3 seed in the NFC today. But after 3 straight losses, they destroyed Jacksonville 34-3 and then versus Tampa 27-14. They were up 27-7. In that game, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for domination from a team that we know talent-wise is right there with everybody else. But the most important thing that I think is worth reminding ourselves every year with every great team or the team that we have the highest expectations for, and when they disappoint us or we start to have a little bit of doubt, we need to always go back and look at history. Because if you look at the past Super Bowl winners, almost all of them have had a bad stretch of recent years. And sure, there's years where a team's clean throughout, and 3 straight for San Francisco makes you question, especially with Purdy being so new to it. And you're like, wait, are they actually built to be able to do this? And I believe that they are. Go back to 22. Kansas City was 4-2 to start the year. Their 4th win was that 1-point game, their 1-point win against the Raiders, where you were kind of like, what's up with that? And they were 4-1, and they lost the next week to Buffalo. In 2021, the Rams lost 3 straight to go from 7-1 to 7-4. In 20, Tampa lost 3 of 4 games in November. In 19, Kansas City went from 4-0 to 6-4. And you're going to say, well, wait, Matt Moore was in for Mahomes in a bunch of those, but they actually won 2 of the games that Moore played in, 2 of those 3. And then the Pats, who were just an 11-5 team in 2018, they lost 3 of 5 in December. 2017 Eagles, that's probably the cleanest team as far as year-to-year, end-to-end for a Super Bowl winner. They ended up 13-3, and that was with a Week 17 loss where they essentially punted on the game with Nate Sudfeld as the starter. So that is the point. What is your ceiling? And we've seen wins from San Francisco, 23-point win, 18-point win, 19-point win, 32 and 31-point wins. And Brock Purdy has been incredible. The offense is number 2 in yards per play. The defense is number 6 in yards per play allowed. And Purdy was near perfect the last 2 games. He had the perfect QB rating yesterday in that game against Tampa. They've got Debo and Trent back. He has the number 1 QBR in the league, the number 1 completion percentage in the league. And San Francisco is right there with any team, despite having a worse stretch in comparison to some of the other contenders, like the 2 teams that are playing tonight. Cleveland is now 7-3, and they beat the Steelers, where I think a lot of us that watch the NFL every single week and then talk about it with no rooting interest really involved, you're going, finally, Pittsburgh lost one of these games. Because if they had won that one, you're like, I give up. And the weird part of the Pittsburgh math was that prior to this loss, you were wondering, are they going to end up being 8-3 because they're going to be playing against DTR and then Jake Browning in back-to-back games? Hell, they're winning games, I can't believe, against better quarterbacks, and now they're going to go up against 2 guys with almost no experience whatsoever. They might end up 8-3, and then we're going to have to act like we're going to have to pretend it's like the Tebow run with Denver. We're like, they won again? And then you have to come into work on Monday going, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I almost gave up that year. I think I may have. Like, oh, it's unquantifiable. It's just this energy about the team. And you're like, no. And this is what happens with some teams, and it's what's happened with Pittsburgh so far. So they're not going to go 8-4. And again, it's not rooting against Pittsburgh. It's just going, I can't believe they keep winning these football games. And Tomlin deserves credit for always feeling like this team is somewhat competitive, even though we may not like the overall talent. Although they usually have a pretty good group, like good balance throughout the positional stuff that they have on the team. But when you don't have the quarterback, and they haven't really had it for a while, and there's some alarming stuff happening with Pickett. He is far worse this year than he was last year. We wondered if they had a guy and then you'd see that second-year bump based on some nice stuff from last season, but their best chance is to throw it deep on the outside, and that doesn't always work. It's funny because when you look at the aggressiveness numbers for quarterbacks, Pickett's actually among the most aggressive. It's just not really working out. He had 106 passing yards yesterday, his 5th game with his 5th game sub 200 passing yards. And I said he's already been much worse. And if you actually look at the yards per game, just the traditional stuff, he is second to last among any of the quarterbacks who've started 10 games. 172.2 yards. Last is Minshew at only 171.1. So he's only like a yard better than him. And the other problem for the Pickett question for Pittsburgh is he's 25. So you wonder where this is going. It's clearly going in the wrong direction, and we may not have the definitive answer, but it feels like a lot of us have that answer. Let's talk Cleveland's defense, though, because this group is doing some heavy lifting. This group is special. We always like to give you a Mike Sando nugget from his Pick 6 column in The Athletic. I enjoy it. It's a must-read every Monday morning. So of all the teams that have gone 7-3 to start a season since 2000, since the EPA numbers were tracked, right, expected points added, this Browns team is giving you the worst offensive performance in terms of EPA of any team that's 7-3 or better since they started tracking this thing 23 years ago. That is impressive from the defense. Awards, let's throw a couple at you here. How about the Crying Game Award for surprise ending? Didn't expect that. Denver's win last night against Minnesota. These two teams, however, just as an aside, deserve all the credit for the guys in the locker room not quitting, the coaches for figuring out something to remain competitive. Both these teams with these records, you start looking at the playoff seeding as of today, and you're like, who's hovering around where it doesn't really quite make any sense? Who's the seventh team getting it in the NFC, right? So Denver goes from 1-5 to 5-5. They pull this one out. The Wilson to Cortland Sutton game-winning touchdown, and then they still had to get a stop in the other end. At that point, the Broncos had not scored a touchdown. They had 5 field goals. And the overall numbers from Wilson are cool, and the highlight and the game-winning touchdown's cool. You know, they got that pass interference, what they should have gotten against Buffalo, but that was a pop-up throw against a zero blitz where the throw wasn't good. The decision to get it up in the air, though, was something you'd expect from Wilson, who's been around this long. I don't know if the throw to Sutton was great. I think it was the math of Sutton's big and has a chance, and they've started to click after, I think, Broncos fans being disappointed with Sutton so far. Maybe they just shifted that disappointment to Judy, but it feels like he's got to go in a little bit better now. But I did not expect Denver at that point without a touchdown to score to get you the 6. I just didn't. So there's a movement, as I've noticed this morning with some of the coverage, and this is just what happens. It's happened even a couple times with Zach Wilson, where the Jets defense carried his ass for an entire 60 minutes, where a guy will finish 13-20 with 180 yards, 1 touchdown, no picks, and then people start, as I said with Willie Colon the other day, like we attempt to lie to ourselves about what a quarterback really is. And it's going to happen with Wilson because of the record and some of the numbers. Because look at this. You want a lie and a truth? Wilson's QB rating, which can definitely tell some lies over the years, is 3rd in the NFL. His QBR, which tells the truth, is 19th. His QBR 50 is obviously much better than it was last year, where it was in the 30s, but it's still the worst of any season that he would have had in Seattle. His 7 yards per attempt is the lowest of his entire career. Now, he's been much cleaner when it comes to interceptions, only 4 this season, 0 in the last 4 games. But the thing is that Peyton is having him throw less. Russell Wilson attempted 32 or more passes in the first 3 games. He had 35 attempts last night, but it's only the second time in the last 7 games where Wilson's had 30 or more attempts in a game. He's also, and this is a really telling stat, according to Next Gen, he's the second least aggressive quarterback in the NFL on throws. Now, the aggressiveness number is calculated by a yard or less of separation from the receiver and the closest defender. Like Pickett actually has a really high aggressive rating in this. Wilson is ahead of only Daniel Jones, who isn't even playing anymore. So that's telling you. And if you look at his throw chart on Next Gen, and I would say just type it into X and search it and see some of the throw charts and patterns from all the different quarterbacks. It's really good stuff. And you can see it is littered with stuff at or behind the line of scrimmage. So when you're watching last night's game, figuring out Wilson's going to have to make some kind of throw here that he hasn't really been comfortable with this season, and specifically last night's game, that's why the Sutton touchdown was even more. But he had to. Look, at that point he had to. Sutton goes up, wins the catch despite the coverage. So a guy who has been arguably the least aggressive active quarterback in the NFL made an aggressive throw last night. But do not fall for the Wilson is back. The Wilson is he's figured some stuff out. He's not throwing as many picks, but I just don't think Peyton's trusting him if you look at the throw chart. What is really impressive with Denver is this defense feels sustainable. They covered it on the broadcast last night, playing some of the younger guys. Some of those vets must have just been dogs. They decided, we're just going to move on from you. So maybe it's just overall a better feeling, and everything feels better when you're winning. What's not sustainable, but maybe the most important factor in Denver turning things around, they have forced 12 turnovers, 12 in the last 3. Defense can carry it on. I don't know how you're going to be forcing turnovers at that kind of rate consistently through the end of the season. I'm going to go one more award here. It's the Kenny Chesney Award. Rams Seahawks. I was rooting for everyone in this game. Geno Smith gets knocked out. After we saw heard and saw the Aaron Donald audio when Geno was getting pass rushed by him, and I think he yelled like, "Oh my God." Then to get blasted, Drew Lock comes in, throws a pick. Thanks, dude. And then you have Stafford who gets destroyed. And when he gets crunched, you're like, is this it? Is this it? It's not it. And the Rams come back. It was a sloppy, ugly game, but I wasn't rooting against anyone. I was rooting for everyone in this one, Chesney style. Just hand me the dad hat and let me get on this set. The best win, that's going to be tonight. There's a couple of things that I could have reached and picked for in this past Sunday action, but it's going to be tonight. Whoever wins Kansas City, Philly, that will be the single best win of the season. And if it's a close game, if it's a blowout, that'll be the most impressive thing if we were doing college football resumes, whoever gets this one tonight. So I'm not going to take away from Monday Night Football knowing how much tonight means. Worst loss, let's talk Chargers at Green Bay. The Chargers now 4-6. They were trying to hang on. You figure they're going to Green Bay. Green Bay's offense isn't good. But the problem is every time an offense plays against the Chargers defense, they're awesome. The number of teams that have had their best or second best offensive output, it's almost like more than half of the Chargers' schedule so far this season. So the Chargers go up 20-16, mistakes everywhere from the Chargers, drops, including a much bigger drop we'll get to here in a second. They're up 20-16 in the fourth quarter. So you're thinking, okay, Herbert's found a way to get through this, everything that's happened this season. Of course, Green Bay scores on the next possession, going 75 yards in 6 plays. They go up 23-20. The Chargers did get the ball back twice, and with 30 seconds left, Quentin Johnson on third down, 3rd and 6, drops a go route down the right sideline. He was open. He had a step. Was it going to be the game-winning touchdown? That might be assuming too much, but it certainly would have gotten them a new set of downs and at least set up for a game-tying field goal. So after watching all the mistakes, whether it was receivers or the defense where you needed them to step up following the go-ahead touchdown by the Chargers, immediately giving up one to Jordan Love, where the Packers rarely are, I think this is the second most yards they'd had in the game this season, rarely an offensive threat. Say this with me, because I know they've lost a lot of games, and I know there's nothing there since Justin Herbert's coming to the league to go, that's his moment. Although I felt like his moment might have been last week, the week prior against Detroit, where he scored touchdowns on 5 straight possessions because they knew they were going to stop Detroit. But Justin Herbert is really good. He is really good. It's okay to say it. I know it's been popular to shift the other way, that he's not good because they don't win enough. And I have a very simple philosophy. Sometimes there are players in basketball and football, baseball is different, where the player is exceptional and it just doesn't work out. I feel the same way about coaches. I'm sure the people that really know it better than me are going to tell you this football coach at this college program is an incredible coach, but it just didn't work out. I believe that happens, but we're not allowed to do it with NBA stars, and we're not allowed to do it with NBA players or NFL quarterbacks. There's something about you that has to be wrong. And I really don't think there's anything wrong with Herbert at the position. Sure, he's going to make some mistakes. Sure, he's not Mahomes, okay? But, welcome to everybody else world when we talk about this position. The reason I'm so emphatic about this one is because this Chargers defense and special teams with Staley at the helm has been a disaster since Herbert has come in the league. And I've looked at these numbers in the past. Since 2020, the Chargers have never finished with a combined positive defensive and special teams EPA. So if you add up what you expect from the offense, it's a number, right? What you expect from the defense, it's a number. Special teams, it's a number. If you combine defense and special teams, since 2020, they've ranked 26th, 30th, 20th, and this year it's 29th going into the Green Bay game. So the next time he throws a pick and they lose a game or he makes a mistake, and I was at the Dallas game and I thought he was bad. But guys have bad games. But over the course of his career, Herbert isn't even close to being the problem with the Chargers. And now they lose Bosa on top of everything else. And they were down a couple receivers. We know how talented the roster is. We know the injury history from last season. But he is trying to drag this team to wins every single week, and it's not happening. The other elements, all three phases, they're a one-phase team, and he's one of the best in his phase. So I don't want to hear it anymore about him being the problem or him not being really the guy. He's actually incredible, and we saw it again in the last couple of weeks. Dallas, numbers you should know. All right, since the Week 7 bye, if you look at play selection expectations based on game situation, how often are you going to pass here when maybe you should run? How often would you run here when maybe you should pass? We look at the first down stuff. That's kind of become the league now. If your team is just handing it off on first down all the time, nobody's going to like you anymore. And it actually makes sense. Throw it on first down, see where you're at, and then adjust to see if you can get some of that back on second down. A rushing attempt on first down, unless you are absolutely built for it and you love your matchup in that game, feels like it's just independent. This isn't new, but the realization in some of these numbers that we're looking at. So let's talk Dallas, who won in a blowout. Since that Week 7 bye, Dallas has been the most pass-happy team versus expectations. So if you look at pass run situations, they're at 10% above expected pass situations. So all the other teams that would be going, we might not pass here, Dallas is. And they're doing it 10% more often than these numbers would project. Last number here is Detroit, 8-2. 8-2 on the season. They tried to give it away to Chicago. That's a really important factor when we're trying to figure out the playoff stuff. We know the defense for Detroit. We don't really want to talk about that all that much. But the fact that they are built offensively to get 2 touchdowns in one quarter is a really important factor. Because, all these teams that we're trying to juggle and talk about, and like how far could they go? I think it's a really important thing where you're like, yeah, we actually think we have an offense here and get you 2 touchdowns in a quarter to close a game if you need it. And Detroit proved that again. And hell, they proved it in that Chargers game as well because the defense couldn't get a stop against Herbert. So whenever I think about history, there's some droughts, and then there's Detroit. They're 8-2 for the first time since 1962. Think about that. Like when I heard it, I went, okay, I know it's bad. I know the history's bad, but it's not a Super Bowl. It's not winning the conference. It's not 14. It's 8-2. And the last time they did it was 1962. So think there's a 71-year-old guy who's a huge Lions fan because when he was 5, they won the world championship, right? So he was 10. He's 71 now. He was 10 years old the last time the Lions were 8-2. That seems impossible.